once again. Restore, renovate, reuse on the occasion of 100 years of Oxford Bookstore. The participants, Nicolas Facino, the director, Alias Français de Bengal, Priti Paul, the director of Apeejay Surendra Group and the creative force behind the iconic century-old Oxford Bookstores, GM Kapur, member, governing council and state convener, INTAC, Kolkata, and Mukul Agarwal, the force behind Calcutta Heritage Collective and an architect herself. This is a 45-minute session, and now we'll have Priti joining us online. Over to you, Mukul.
Thank you, Indrila. Many thanks to the Apeejay Kolkata Lit Fest for giving me this opportunity to discuss on our architectural heritage, which is extremely close to my heart. And that is how the Calcutta Heritage Collective was also formed. So let's begin with this famous quote by Walt Disney. All our dreams come true if we have the courage to pursue them. All of us sitting here today have dreams, and most definitely of our built heritage, getting its due recognition and being preserved with pride. India's cultural heritage, and in particular its archaeological and built heritage, is unparalleled in this world. I sincerely hope that among all of us here and there, we are able to today discuss not only the issues and behind it and the importance of observing our built heritage, but also to bring out points and solutions that lead to an ease of preservation and suggests reuse of these magnificent properties, which are gems in our city and lend Calcutta its character. During this conversation today, I will call our city by its old name, Calcutta. I hope the organizers don't have an issue on this. Thank you. Each speaker will speak for about 7 to 8 minutes, and then there'll be a round of questions, and then we'll open it to the floor. Now, before I ask the panelists to speak, as a founder trustee of CHC, I would like to talk about a few verticals of our work which are relevant to today's topic and which we have taken it as very important, which we feel we have to do to reach any measures of success. The first and foremost is being aware of our heritage. Rather, what is the meaning of heritage? Why is it necessary to protect our built heritage? How does it help to preserve our built heritage? This awareness needs to be created not only amongst us, but also amongst the young, who are the future of this world. This we have done and are continuing to do so through walks, day tours, talks, quizzes, etc. And this then leads us to the next point. Why is it necessary to conserve? One very important reason amongst many is that these are sustainable opportunities. Our beautiful world is undergoing huge pressures, leading to climate changes amongst many others, as a result of various thoughtless actions by the humanity at large. One recent, glaring and horrifying example is the Joshimath, which all of you must be seeing on the news last 5 days. Experts have narrowed down the causes of its precarious condition to rampant infrastructure development. This is another very important reason why we should all together work at reusing the beautifully and scientifically built structures of yesteryears to save us all and to save the world. This now takes us to the third and very important point. We have to find ways, specially formed laws and rules that benefit all. The property owner, the developer, and the authorities. Even the shocking destruction of sometimes grade A structures, which GM would know, can be stopped only if we set laws in place that is good for all. For example, the transferable development rights, very popularly known as the TDR. Expert architects and urban planners concurred that while designing future buildings, we have to build not at the cost of the environment, but beside it. Also, it's not about the new and the old, like mainstream versus art cinema. Rather, old and new can coexist as we develop into the future. We see that all over, all in the European cities, lending each city its unique character. So why can't we? So to ponder over all this and more, let's begin with our first panelist, Mr. Nicolas Facino, Director of Alliance Française de Bengal. About 35 kilometers from Calcutta, Chandanagar on the Hooghly was a French colony for more than 100 years. Till 1951, the French government is taking interest in the development of that town, funding restoration of many structures. In fact, French is still taught at the Chandanagar College. Your government takes a lot of interest in restoration. In fact, some of you may not even know that the address of the Alliance Française is it's right here in this more than a century-year-old building, Park Mansions. So, Nicolas, could you run us through some of the properties and projects that the French government has undertaken over the past few years? And maybe you could also talk about the reasons of why the government is taking interest, and at the same time, have you faced any roadblocks? And if you have, how have you overcome them?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mukul, for this great introduction. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizer of this amazing festival, Apeejay Kolkata Literature Festival. I'm here as a panelist, but also as a friend and as a neighbor, as you mentioned. So yes, France, through the action of the French Institute in Delhi and the French Embassy, use also to help the promotion of heritage building. Because we are lucky in our country, we have this tradition of many heritage building. So through expertise exchange, through a program, I could speak lately. But you spoke also Chandanagar. So Chandanagar, I've been many times, and it's always the same pleasure. And I understand why we used to describe Chandanagar as the French town with a Bengali heart. And as you know, yes, it was a trading town, part of the erstwhile French territory in India, 5, in fact. There was Pondicherry, Yanam, Karyakal, and Mai. And it's very peaceful place, because also we can appreciate the soft rhythm of the Hooghly, but also it's a city with a huge heritage building. And in fact, heritage is not about whole building. When I walk there, I can notice that it's about the people who lived then and also the people who live now. And so in Chandanagar, we have developed a project also with a partnership. I could describe a little bit, yes. In fact, it's called the Registry Building. I was lucky to visit this. Situated on the corner of the Strand Road, opposite the Renegade Jetty. So it's a very good location. And it is one of the oldest French buildings in Chandanagar. Local sources indicate that this building was originally the French court, where marriage and death were registered. However, we need more researches to precise this. So the restoration and the reuse of the registry building is proposed as a pilot project of regeneration and sustainable development of Chandanagar through a unique partnership between the government of West Bengal, the French embassy in India, and also various Indian and French partners. The registry building has been listed as a heritage building in 2017. And there is a very good location. But the main objective of this project is to develop a sustainable model for inclusive governance, empowerment of community. It's very important to associate the community, and through the regeneration process. The project brings also together various stakeholders and explores innovative financial models for regeneration. It's also an opportunity for the community to reinforce the cohesion, the social integration, the innovative bottoms, and economic activity and employment creation. Alors, I can develop the highlights of the project, in fact. So the key objectives, there is four main objectives. It's first, awareness raising. We need to be conscious that in this kind of project, people, the community, it is a part of the identity of the city. Because if you visit this place, this building, in fact, it's like in the state is very in a bad shape, you know. So it's not so attractive.
So we have visited
you have
some
visited?
Members, yes, just last week.
Great.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this?
No, lots
it's a great
of work
challenge.
still needs to be done, but it's a beautiful place. Chandanagar is a place where I think everybody should visit.
Yeah. So first we need to be aware about this. And then we need to be aware also about the building's value. Because and to see all the perspective that we can have as a result. For example, we can imagine a cultural space with a co-working space, a public library, a cafe, a boutique hotel. Voilà. This is also important to demonstrate through the pilot project the potential of heritage as an important vehicle for economic regeneration and social integration. Then it's also an opportunity to build the capacity through training for the youth generation, and to develop, for example, the craftsmanship, and also as a result to develop the job creation. Then it's important to share and to make it known, this project, in order to replicate in another city and to foster the change. Because this place, we have the ambition to make this place more attractive in a touristic field, also to develop, I say, the sustainable economical model, and to increase the number of visitors of Chandanagar. Every time I welcome a French author, is totally seduced by this place. Voilà. So just, yeah. I can speak after for the role of France in our city, but please.
Thank you, Nicolas. Now we'll go over to Priti. Is Priti there? Is she here? Yes. We can all see her on screen. We can't hear you, Priti. I think you're muted.
I'm definitely online.
Yes,
Can
now
you
we
hear me
can
now?
hear you. Now we can. Yeah. So, Priti, it is oft said, unfortunately it's true also, that our heritage is at risk. On the other hand, we have hope still. We will have lots of hope till we have groups like Apeejay and its chairperson and architect Priti Paul around. Priti, why don't you tell us some of the renovation projects you have done? Perhaps you could begin with the now 100 years of Oxford Bookstore, and also mention some advantages of the spatial character of these structures, and of course also some issues that you come across as an architect while adapting them to contemporary needs. Priti?
So, over the 100 years of Oxford Bookstore, it's gone through many incarnations and avatars, as the space has evolved and the audience has moved on. So, when I was growing up in Calcutta, I used to visit Oxford Bookstore every week. That was like a pilgrimage that my mother made with us. We were 4 children and my mother, who loved reading. And Oxford had a lending library, which many of you will remember. I think Barry O'Brien was one of the earlier sessions, and he described quite vividly about his memories growing up in Calcutta, and Oxford being like a refuge, a romantic place for romantic liaisons, a place to discover books that you couldn't find, a window to the world. So there was a lending library, and then there was the space, which was amazing. It was double height, voluminous, piled high with books. But it was also a little bit scary because the people who were working there were quite tough, So you would buy the book, you would speak to someone about the book, and then you would take it to another counter where he would make the bill, and then you would take it to the third counter, and then they would, take the payment, and then you would take it to a fourth counter, and it was packed, and then you would take it to a fifth counter, and it was stamped, and then you would leave. So it was kind of intimidating. And generations of really famous writers have growing up on a diet, Oxford, governors, heads of state, princes, all the range of all the Indian writers writing in English, from Amitabh Ghosh to Amit Chaudhary to Jhumpa Lahiri, you name it. So it's kind of a beautiful, enriching space, but also intimidating for a non-English speaker or someone who, couldn't quite access these books. So one of the things that I did when I, came back to Calcutta in 1990, straight off, back from college, I wanted to make it a little bit more inviting and also sort of keep up with the times. So I thought that it was quite important that we add a few, that is 30 years ago already. It was a beautiful double height space with those columns, from the Birmingham Steel and Iron Company from 1923. We wanted to keep, retain the characteristics, the heritage aspects of it, but also try to bring in, new uses, as Nicola mentioned just now. So I wanted to add a gallery. Because it's not always that, art books were just coming out in India, but they were 3,000 rupees, 4,000 rupees, and pretty unaffordable. So my idea was that, people could come and see an exhibition of the photographs and enjoy the works, but not necessarily be able to buy the book. They could just buy a print or enjoy the photographs. So it was called an alternative art gallery, not so much for the purpose of commerce, but for the purposes of exposition, exposure, giving the artist or a photographer the chance. One of the first exhibitions we had, actually the first, was the art of Satyajit Ray. So not his movies, and that was a big hit. It was curated by Sandeep Ray, and it was our first show. And that was the spirit in which it was meant, really about telling stories from the books, and not about just selling. And we thought that, as time moved on, people would be able to buy these beautiful, coffee table books, but people just didn't have the money. And if they did in Calcutta, they would rather have bought some fiction or literature. We added a cafe, a tea bar. It was quite the rage that to have a coffee bar, but I thought that Calcutta is the capital of tea, and we should take ownership of that idea. Right now you see a lot of cafes coming out, tea offerings and this thing, that. But that time it was just really to have this fabulous tea place where you could have a cup of tea, have a chat, browse. So we added a lot of things like that. We added a Bengali section, which was unheard of, and many Bengali people told me that there's no need to put a Bengali section in an English language bookstore, but I thought that, we have a lot of diaspora visiting. Why not give it this importance and give it the space, so you could browse Bengali books. You didn't just have to go to a counter, in, some grubby street, and shout out the title and have it, get thrust into your hand. I thought it was quite nice that you're able to, talk about books, touch them, pick them up, and then carry it back, to wherever you came from. So we added a few sections like that, maybe 5 or 6 interesting. And my idea is to keep innovating. One of the things that we did in terms of book sections is we've curated a really strong list of translation books, books in translation, and Bengal has a history of Bengali books being translated into other languages and other languages translated into Bengali. But there are other communities like Punjabi and other languages where there is not so much writing, and so that's one of our goals as Oxford, is to be able to create that intellectual content. So we renovated the store. It was quite hard because we had to take a lot of permissions, but we wanted to keep the integrity of the historical aspects, but yet make it fresh, modern. I was telling you, Mukul, the other day that when I walk in, I feel like, oh my God, it needs another overhaul. And again, to keep it in,
it's
in
beautiful as is. It's really beautiful as is.
I had Tarun Tehlani, who's, an iconic fashion designer who was in Calcutta doing a fashion shoot, and he said he just loves going in there and he loves the old feel to it. And he said, don't change a single thing. So from the eye of someone who wants to bring, the best of publishing, the most creative and, stimulating space to Calcutta, the bookstore is a gift to the city of Calcutta. It's not a place of commerce, it's a place to ideate, it's a place to relax, it's a place to think, it's a window outward into the world, it's also a window inward into what you're reading or what you're interested in. I feel like lots of things need to keep evolving, and I hope we keep doing, because that's what will keep us going for the next 100 years. And as Nicolas said, he's looking at the registry building and thinking of ways to keep it alive, and that's something that the French are very good at, taking pieces of history and keeping it relevant. So why not an Oxford bookstore at the registry building? And maybe the books selection there could be 50% English and 50% Bengali, with a lot of French thrown in as well, or bilingual books. So it's a space, it's what you curate in terms of events, it's a book list, it's all these things that keep, a bookstore or a historical space active in, and engaged with the city. I was in Qatar for the World Cup, and I had the greatest pleasure to be invited by the president of the Qatar National Library to visit the National Library of Qatar, which was a stunning building designed by Rem Koolhaas, so totally modern, totally cutting edge, with one of my favorite architects, hands down. And so it's a stepped up piece of architecture, like a stepwell, but it's stepped down as well. And stepped down is all the historical archives, like the really ancient texts of Qatar. And then stepped up is all the modern books. So I think, a lot of people are grappling with these issues of how to create these cultural spaces. And our bookstore, I would say, is much more than a bookstore. It's a cultural space that's intrinsic to the fabric of Calcutta and any other city that we exist in. And the way to keep it relevant is to restore, renovate, reuse.
Yes, Priti, we cannot ever imagine Calcutta without Oxford and Park Street, which is, I'm really glad you have kept the culture, the character of this whole street as is, wherever, the areas that you have kind of restored and renovated. Thank you so much. Now let us... Can I just say one more thing?
Yes, of course. I'm sorry, I didn't answer one question, which is what other projects are we working on? So in Delhi, in front of the Park Hotel in Delhi, we've taken over the Jantar Mantar, and we've been cleaning it up, lighting it. We are working in Punjab, and we're restoring a palace which is going to be reinvented as a boutique Park Hotel. I'm just naming a few.
If I can just intervene, Priti, I will be asking you a question later. Maybe you could bring these points in then. Yeah? Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. Now let's have GM, the very popular GM of Calcutta, Mr. GM Kapur, speak on INTAC and what INTAC has done for Calcutta, for India. Mr. GM Kapur has been at the helm of the Eastern chapter of INTAC since forever, I know. I don't know how many years. And obviously he's done INTAC under him has done a lot of great work. So GM, would you like to talk about the projects that has been done and also the issues that you have faced being in Calcutta, being in West Bengal, the apathy of people, I don't know if you want to mention anything with the authorities, anything. I mean, we learn from your journey as the INTAC chairperson here.
I thank you very much, Mukul. I have a long association with the city, of course, right since birth, and also with INTAC, which was set up in 1984. And what I can see and I'm glad about is that at least we have managed to bring heritage conservation to the forefront. When we started our journey, heritage was something which was not heard of, and people had really little to talk about. They did not know anything about conservation, or they were not interested in conservation. Now, all those years, the city had been totally neglected as far as built heritage is concerned. In fact, it was what the Supreme Court has recently passed an order with respect to Chandigarh. Chandigarh is, I think now more than 70 years old. It's I would say it's a modern heritage, and it needs to be preserved in the way Le Corbusier designed it. And there was talk of the Supreme Court has used very strong words. They've talked about the nexus between the builders, the politicians, and the bureaucrats who were almost in the verge of permitting high-rises, or at least more than single-storied, double-storied houses to come up there. So, to that extent, we did not have that thinking in those days. I mean, senior citizens would all remember the Park Street, Kamak Street, Theatre Road, all had garden houses, by and large. Not one is, maybe a few are left, but by and large, mostly gone, without a thought of on the carrying capacity of the roads and the infrastructure. We are sitting here in a repurposed, reused heritage building. I don't know whether Nicolas is aware, the Allianz had its first office here. And when we gave the award for excellence in restoration to the Apeejay group, your predecessor happened to be sitting here, and he immediately said, I must have my office here. So, to that extent, this is a perfect example of restoration and reuse. This building, and then thanks to the Pauls, we wouldn't have been sitting here otherwise. Other than that, we have been involved in a lot of things, so I don't think it will be very interesting to go through. I mean, we were involved in the legislation, listing, hands-on restoration work, and advisories, all sorts of activities. But what is important is, I would like to mention, there's another, we see the unbridled and rampant destruction of built heritage of the city, which has led to an overload on the carrying capacity of our civic infrastructure. Traffic jams, waterlogging, overcrowded pavements, the list is endless. So had we given some importance to heritage and its conservation, maybe things would have been better. But we should not be seen as anti-development. Development must take place, but there has to be a balance. That is our view. And it is important that heritage pays. In fact, in the US, you have to prove that heritage pays. And that's a tongue-in-cheek, that to protect something will be more profitable than neglecting it. That is important. But you also have to realize that in the case of heritage versus Walmart is just the name they have used, the heritage will never win. This is Professor Randall Mason from the University of Pennsylvania. So that is what you're fighting against, that you have a very tough job, or we all have a very tough job. And conservationists fight to protect and preserve what they perceive to be priceless historic assets, which they contend often serve both to preserve important elements of local or national history and culture, and also to provide a community focus through the preservation of what has come to be termed as collective memory. So that is a very important aspect, that collective memory is something which we must arouse. Just as Nicolas mentioned about Chandanagar, we have been partnering the Danish government for the restoration of Sirampur. And there also, exactly what you have said, that the same process was followed where the community was taken into confidence and community started taking pride in their heritage. And the Danes made it very clear that it is not that we are trying to revive our colony in Bengal or something. It was never a colony, they called it trading post. And the thing is that they said this was all part of the local milieu. So we were also there along with the local people. So that's what they wanted to highlight. And then today again, that is a place worth visiting. All those buildings which have been revived, they are, I think, drawing attention and they're drawing tourists. In fact, we had another, since you were asking about projects, our initial river heritage project was Europe on the Ganges. This was about 25 years ago, where we tried to highlight the tourism potential of these sites along the river. And that was, in a way, what triggered off a lot of the tourism activity in that area. Some questions which continue to be topics of discussion include what aspects of our built heritage should be regarded as valuable and why. These are questions which need to be addressed. Yes, yes. What value the built heritage adds to society? There are questions which people ask. What is the value of this heritage? How valuable built heritage is both in absolute terms and in relative terms compared to alternatives such as redevelopment, and how value should be defined. Additionally, the value of heritage, whether in economic, social, cultural, or environmental terms, is central to most of our notions of how that heritage should be managed, and particularly in terms of issues. Which elements of our built heritage should be preserved, conserved, restored, maintained, relocated, ignored, or demolished? Broadly, these are questions which I think should be put out in the public domain and discussed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, GM. I think I really hope by the end of our session, we all don't have that question in our minds, what is the value of our heritage? Why do we need to value our heritage? We will all collectively say, yes, our heritage is valuable and we have to work towards it. And you brought up another very important point, which is heritage pays. And that leads to Nicolas, again, of how heritage does present a unique opportunity for generating employment and incomes through heritage tourism and even for the local community. So you wanted to speak about how this has helped. You did mention in Chandanagar, and you also wanted to speak about an exchange of education where your students of architecture from France.
Of course.
Yeah.
But first of all, Alliance Française is an educational and cultural center in Park Mansion. And I would like to take the opportunity to share the floor with Priti Paul, to thank her and to thank the Paul family, because for Alliance Française and for the people who work, we feel very lucky. Every morning when I reach the office, so it's experience from a worker, you know, I feel lucky and I feel impressed and proud. And when we speak to the students, why you're happy to come to Alliance Française, of course the quality of courses, but also the location. They feel very proud, very impressed to cross the gate and to join Alliance Française. So it's very important, but it's also a good source of inspiration to be in Park Mansion, because we can organize also a cultural and artistic event. This kind of heritage building inspires artists. We have organized the rickshaw. It was an artistic and event based on a rickshaw and the cinema here in the courtyard. But maybe you know the French city Lyon. Lyon is a city that every year organizes the Festival of Lumière, the Light Festival. And it's a way to settle in all the city, in the heart of the city, the heritage and the building, the video mapping. And it's very impressive with music and image connected to the history of Lyon and also to the imagination of artists. So maybe it will be an idea. I could continue the conversation with Priti Paul, maybe. But you spoke about education, indeed. So I say that it's important to connect the project with the university, with school, to associate the students. In Chandigarh, we have welcomed experts, but also a group of students in architecture from France to study the Le Corbusier legacy in Chandigarh. And in Kolkata, also last year, we have welcomed 20 students from the Villette School of Architecture in the frame of the program called Learning from Indian Cities. And they have prepared an exhibition after 3 weeks of workshop in the streets and in the neighborhood of Kolkata. In fact, to study the link between trades and neighborhoods. And the exhibition called The Urbanity of Trade. It was very, very nice, and it was showed in the magnificent stairs in our building. So it's also a way to share
When
this.
are they coming next?
Yeah, we hope next year, because it's every
Great.
2 years.
Great, we look forward to that.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you. If Priti is there, this next question is for her. Yeah, hi Priti.
Hi.
So you were mentioning about other projects. Now, what I want you to really speak about is the recent thing that the government, not very recent, about 3-4 years ago, about adopt a heritage. Now, I know you are doing a lot of work, Apeejay is doing a lot of work, and there are some other corporates who are doing, but it is kind of debatable. There are lots of pros and cons. I think there's always just a plus on this, but there are other people, I mean, there are all kinds of views. What do you think about it, since you've already worked on heritage?
So you're asking me to talk about the project
Adopt
or
a
on
heritage?
art?
Adopt a heritage? What do you feel about that?
So I can't answer the question specifically, but what I can just talk about is our experiences in Bengal, and also some of the other projects that we're doing in other parts of India. I think that we are all, one of the reasons that I'm an architect also is because I grew up in Calcutta and I saw, the most amazing buildings being broken down. And over 18 years of growing up in Calcutta, and making way for the most ugly concrete towers, badly executed, badly painted, and which would fall into a state of disrepair. So I think the whole ethos of at least the Apeejay group, my sister and my brother who work with me, is that, you know, we've grown up and we feel very strongly that these are important parts of our culture in Bengal, which is where we started, and also in other cities. So, for example, in Delhi, in front of, so this is not just a Bengal problem, it's a problem across the country where, you know, we don't either have the funds or the wherewithal or the knowledge or the expertise or the desire to preserve our monuments, but mostly in other parts of India, I found that there's sort of strict rules and laws, whereas maybe in Calcutta, you know, there was some leeway, you know, to break things down, but I feel that that's also, you know, tightened up. So in Delhi, in front of Park Hotel, there's a Jantar Mantar, which is an astronomical clock, and there's only two, one in Delhi and Jantar Mantar. So Park Hotel employees adopted that to start cleaning it up, and then restoring it, repainting it, lighting it. So there are projects like that, but the government in Delhi was very clear that there could be no, you know, sponsorship name. So you don't know who's doing it behind the scenes, so that people didn't benefit from it. So there are various, you know, in Punjab we are restoring this hotel, which belongs to a Maharaja. You know, Sirampur, that Mr. G.M. Kapur, you know, talked about, the Danish tavern, which we are operating, but it was restored by the Danish government. So there are various types of partnerships that you can form. And I think the foremost thing about these partnerships is that your heart and your intent has to be in the right place. I don't think that you need to start, you know, these restoration projects, because each of them require a lot of coordination and hand-holding with a variety of stakeholders. It could be the local government, it could be the local people, it could be agencies, it could be operators. So the important thing is that you start working on the project or restoring it by believing in what you do, which is that the historical and restoration aspect, the reuse, the revitalization of it, not about, you know, how big your name is going to be and how much of company leverage you're going to get from it, and whether it's CSR or it's not CSR. So I think my point of view on this is that you need to believe in the intrinsic value of the project. What does that building mean to the society? What does it mean to the country? What does it mean to the locality? And then work on it in a very serious and concerted way to try to revitalize, recreate, reuse in a very sincere fashion. I think all that branding, you know, CSR, you know, all that part has to be secondary. You know, commercial, obviously, you know, people will look at the money aspect of it, how much is the return, you know, if I spend this much restoring it, will I get a return on my investment? I think all that has to be secondary. But unfortunately, the kind of, you know, and Mr. G.M. Kapur knows the ground realities more than me about restoration projects. Most of it, people look at the return on investment. Is it better for me to knock down the building and build something snazzy instead? You know, should I really be doing the restoration? Should I have my name? So you restore a beautiful building and then you have a big signage in front, which then, you know, counterbalances that. All those things come into effect more than the intent. So I think the heart has to be in the right place. And then from there, I know this sounds very optimistic and idealistic, but I think that the intent has to be very pure. And then from it, you can create something that's beautiful and meaningful and that connects with the audience, whether it's the local people in Sirampur or it's tourists or a bookshop that you would want everyone who visits Calcutta and Calcuttans to love. So that's my take on it.
Our hearts have to be in the right place. You said it, and I'm sure all of us sitting here have our hearts in in the right place.
Just mention one point.
Of course.
I just want to add here that apart from what Priti has said, what is another question which we must ask is what is going to come up instead of what is being pulled down, going to add to the grandeur of the city.
Yes.
We lost the Bengal Club, which was on Chaurangi, and in its place came up the Chatterjee International Building. Now, similarly, the Dalhousie Institute in Dalhousie Square was pulled down and the Telephone Bhavan came up. Yes. Now, are they adding to the grandeur of the city? This is also a question which needs to be answered.
What was pulled down and 42 came up? two buildings.
Yeah, there was that Darbhanga Palace was there, and the Kenilworth Hotel was there. So all that is also something to be. But then a question is, the economic issues come up. Anyway.
So, GM, we just have a few minutes. So very quickly, recently I read the ASI has revealed that 50 out of the listed, you know about it, of course, 3,678 centrally protected monuments are untraceable. Can you believe it? And the INTAC has a case of the unprotected is a pioneering pan-India initiative, right? It's state of built heritage of India, so be something like that. It's a vertical.
State of built heritage of India.
State, yeah. So how would you look at this? What is your comment on this?
I find I'm at a total loss for words at this ridiculous situation where 50 protected monuments have vanished. I can't believe it. But in our case, we are looking at, you see, our whole objective when we were set up was to protect the unprotected heritage. So our take is listing out the unprotected heritage and documenting its condition assessment. That is the state of built heritage which we have published.
Thank you. We have a few minutes. We can take some questions from the floor.
Mukul, I have a question. This is for GM. GM, you touched upon this, and this, I think, is one of the main stumbling blocks to the roadblock to preservation of heritage. Look at the scenario. Somebody has a crumbling old mansion, and there are many branches of that family who are living there. That is their sole source of a hope for a better future. How do we balance the need of the individuals against heritage preservation? There has to be a map, a road map, for satisfying both, like in England, in the UK, you have the National Trust taking on these things. Is there a corporate involvement possible? How do we handle it?
There is no corporate involvement possible at this stage. What I think Mukul had mentioned briefly is a possibility of a TDR so that the owners get some economic benefit. I fully agree with you that unless you give some economic benefit to the owners, you are fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
But there is still always a ray of hope. In today's Telegraph, you would have read that the Banerjee home has found
really
a buyer.
wonderful.
Yeah.
So it is possible. And I always, try to equate a heritage building with a vintage car. You have to start taking pride in your building, then its value goes on increasing.
Also, GM, when Kenilworth was sold and overnight it was pulled down, one of the things that I kept hearing discussed is that the government can give permission to dig, to make the foundation deeper, so that on one side, the grounds, a higher building can come up with the undertaking that the old building is reserved for a different use. Why are we not pursuing things like that? Is it possible?
No, the case of Kenilworth, I think, need not be discussed here because it's a total, what would I call
Losing case.
No, it was, the KMC was very much actively involved in getting it out of the list. That is something which should not have happened.
Yeah.
In fact, you are aware that we have a PIL pending in court.
Yes.
Addressing those issues.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is that they wanted to construct more in that plot, so they consumed that Kenilworth area into, that is subsumed is the word, into this 42 Chaurangi. That was so that they got a bigger FAR. That was the whole game.
The audience.
do we have time for one more question from the floor? Last
Brief
one. Yeah? Can you give the mic there, please? Yes, Monica.
So one of the major culprits for heritage being lost is FAR. Now, FAR it is not only destroying heritage, it also causes a huge drain on infrastructure. So why is it that we are not looking at reducing FAR? Every time in the corporation there is a huge lobby to keep increasing FAR. If we simply reduce FAR, what happens in a lot of buildings which do get preserved is the fact that they happen to be covering so much area and they happen to be located on such a road that if they were broken and a new building was built, then the FAR would not be consumed. And those are the ones which get saved. The ones which get lost are the ones which were on bigger plots and where we can avail a greater FAR. Now supposing we, in an old area of the city, we flat out that we reduce FARs. That's the one way I feel that we can look at restoring heritage to some degree.
Are you addressing this to
the FAR question that GM said?
GM, quick.
I agree with what she's saying, but I doubt if that is even being considered.
It's not being considered.
It is never
all of us
discussed.
have to work towards it, I think, Monica. You've raised a very good point.
No, it's certainly.
Yeah.
I can give just 1 minute. I'll give one example of this FAR issue. The currency building has a total built area of about 95,000 square feet. If that building was pulled down under the current rules, building rules and the bylaws, one could have constructed 100,000 square feet or maybe 110,000 square feet. So you would have got 10,000 square feet more. But that building would have been lost to the city for the sake of 10,000 square feet.
Okay, we will have to, I've been given a warning, so we will have to end this session. I will invite...
So I would like to thank Nicola, thank Priti, thank GM, and thank Apeejay. So it's now time for all of us to rediscover, to revive, and to renew. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All for we'll do that. Actually, we should go down there, ask Priti to join and take the photograph, but it's okay. We'll do it from here. Come. Nicolas Facino. GM Kapur. Mukul Agarwal, who anchored this really informative session. Thank you so much. Just stay here for a photograph, please.